Hello, today I'm going to share with you how to draft a palazzo trouser. So if it's your first time coming across my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So first, I'm going to go ahead to mark out all the basic measurements that I need for this trouser, which is I'll mark shoulder to 10 inches, which is my crotch. To get your crotch is your hip circumference divided by 4, or you can go ahead and sit on a flat surface and take your measurement from your waist. So now I'm going to go ahead and I will mark my waist to knee. So my waist to knee is 21 inches and I'll go ahead to mark it on that point. Now I'll mark my full trouser length. My full trouser length is 40 inches and I'll go ahead to take the measurement. After that, I'm going to go ahead to rule a straight line at those points to mark it all out. After marking it out, I'm going to go ahead to start imputing my measurements. So at this point, which is my hip, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4. So remember, I'm using my crotch depth also to mark my hip point. So I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4, and after that I'm going to divide my hip by 4, giving me 10, and divide it again, which will give me 2.5. So that is the mark I made in front, which is my front crotch extension, and I'll mark my hip circumference at the top and I will connect it. So at this point, I'm just going to measure what I have, which is about 12.5 inches, because my hip is 40 divided by 4 plus 2.5. So now I'm going to divide what I have, and after dividing it, I have about 6.3 inches, and I'll go ahead to mark approximately 6.3 or 6.25. So I'm going to go ahead to mark it all the way to the lines on the trouser, which is the knee point, the trouser length, and at the lower part I added 2 inches for folding allowance for the trouser. Now I'm going to rule a straight line to connect to the upper part of my pattern. So I'll go ahead and also divide what I have here into 2. That is that 12.5 inches. Go ahead to fold my tape and I will mark. After doing that, I'll connect it to the upper part of my pattern. Now I'm going to take my curved ruler and I'm going to connect from that 2.5 inches down to my line that I have on this point. So this is what I have, and the next step is to go ahead to mark about 2 inches after my crotch, which I also used as my hip. So I'm going to go ahead to mark this, and I'm going to draw a line, and that will be serving as my thigh line. So now you want to start imputing your measurement. So my thigh measurement is 26 divided by 2. I have 13, and then that 13 divided by 2, I have 6.5. So I'll mark. So since I have 12.5 divided by 2 at the upper part of my crotch, and at the thigh I have 13 divided by 2, the extra ½ inch I'll be moving it towards the crotch part of my trouser. So after doing that, I'll go ahead to mark the knee measurement round, and my knee measurement is 18 divided by 2, I have 9. So 9 divided by 2, I have 4.5, and I will be marking 4.5 at both sides. So now I'm not adding any allowance to this pattern. All the allowance will be added on the back pattern. So the next thing you want to do is just to go ahead and you're going to connect your trouser this way from the hip line down to the knee line. So after doing that, let's go over and work on the waist. Now from the waist, I'm going to go in by ½ inch so that it's going to align with what I have at the waist. So from here, that ½ inch I marked, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4. Now I'll be adding 1 inch for that intake, which will be sewing out, and after that I'll be adding ½ inch for sewing allowance at the waistline. So this is the only part you'll be adding a sewing allowance at the waist. So after I'm done marking this, the next step is just to go ahead and connect from that my waist down to the hip point, or to the crotch line that I have on that point. After connecting to that point, the next step is to place my ruler from my crotch down to that ½ inch I came in on top, and I'm going to go ahead to connect. But before you connect, make sure this part has the measurement of your hip, so that when you're sewing, it's not going to be too tight at the hip area to accommodate your hip. Now I'm going to go ahead to connect this way. So this is what I have on my trouser pattern. So since it's a palazzo trouser, the measurement I have on my knee is what I'll be transferring to the lower part of my pattern, and I'll go ahead to mark it all the way down. And after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to connect my pattern from the lower part down to the upper part of this pattern. So after connecting my pattern, this is what the front pattern of my trouser looks like, and the next step is just to go ahead to cut this out. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please hit on the subscribe button and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So while cutting your trouser, to make sure that the waistline of the trouser does not exceed what you have, go ahead and remeasure before you cut out, because you don't want to have any excess. Now I'll cut out this part. So this is the final look of my trouser, and the next step I'll take is to go ahead to come down by 1 inch at this point, and I will slope it to the waistline or at the other side of my trouser. So after sloping it, make sure you also remeasure so that your waistline is the same. You don't want your waistline to be bigger than what your waist is or smaller when you're drafting out your pattern. So after this, I'm going to go ahead to cut out, and we are done drafting the front pattern of this trouser. So to draft out the back pattern of this trouser, we'll be placing this pattern on another pattern, and all we are going to do is just to go ahead to trace out. Once you're done cutting the front, to cut the back is very easy. So after placing this, I'll be marking 2 inches in front, so you can go ahead and use 3 inches. So this totally depends if your hip is bigger. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead and extend it by 2.5. You can also use 3 inches if your hip is more than 40-42. So now I'll go ahead and connect those lines. After connecting it, I'm just going to rule it out to make it more visible, because my pattern paper was actually joined at that point. So I'll go ahead and reconnect. After I'm done reconnecting, I'll go ahead and I will be adding 2 inches in front of my pattern this way. So I'm going to add it to the end of this. So this will be serving as my joining allowance to the back pattern, which is half on both sides of the front and half on the both sides of the back. So after adding it to the end, I'm just going to draw a line and connect it together. After that, I'll go ahead to rule a line to connect it to make it more visible for you to see. So after I'm done connecting this, the next thing I'm going to do is just to go ahead to go up by 2.5 inches. So this depends on you. So if you're someone with a bigger butt, go ahead and use 3 inches. So now I'm going to slant this down to this part, but before I do that, what I have on the front waistline, I'm going to go ahead and measure that on this back. So watch as I do that, and after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and slant it. So this is where the front pattern will end on this point, and connect it in front. So from that point, I'm going to open up my front pattern, trace from the hip down to what I have on that point with my ruler. So this is to make sure that my back is not bigger than at the waist, the back waistline is not bigger than the front waistline, and I'll go ahead to trace this out. So after this, I'll go ahead to cut out my pattern, and we are done drafting out this pattern. So after this is my final look for my trouser pattern. This is the back and this is the front part of my pattern. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and see you in our next video. Thanks.